I'm Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Well, originally I was hoping today would be a slightly different video, but I had my vaccine booster on Monday and I haven't been feeling so hot this week, so I just needed something easy. Today is also the time I am finally filming a video that was the first video idea I ever had. Yes, the idea for this video was the first ever idea I had for a video, and it's been almost 4 years, so now seems like a good time to do it. Today I'm going to be telling you my personal top 5 performances by Julie Andrews. Now, this list is limited to movies, so stage ones like My Fair Lady and Camelot, not eligible. And these are specifically her performances. They do not necessarily correspond with how much I like the movie itself. In fact, some of the movies on this list are far from my favourites, so it's her performance in the movie and not the movie itself. Also, possible spoilers for these movies. You have been warned. But let's get going. Number 5 is Jerusha Bromley Hale in Hawaii. Now, if you saw my video towards the end of last year, my Today in Julie Andrews history video about Hawaii, you will know that I am not a fan of this movie. It is objectively a very good film and I understand why people love it, but it's not for me. But I do think it is one of Julie's best performances. I feel so bad for Jerusha. She gives her whole life away basically before it's even begun, just so Abner can be a missionary and go to Hawaii. It's not like they're sweethearts. In fact, it's the opposite. We see her old sweetheart later on in the movie. And Abner himself is also not crazy about the idea of getting married. But to go to Hawaii, he needs to be married. And she just happens to be a good option. And she pretty much gives up her life to go there. She never gets to go back. And as the movie goes on, she just gets more drained and worn out and fed up. And the scene where she finally snaps is the last one she's in before she dies. Also the childbirth scene. Enough said. I read somewhere that after her father watched that scene, he thought to himself, she really is an actress. Number 4. Victoria Grant / Victor Krasinski in Victor Victoria. The movie version. I made a whole Today in Julie Andrews history video about the musical, and you can go watch that if you want. But long story short, it didn't need to exist. Outside of one thing, the movie did everything better. And there is so much nuance to this role, or rather roles. With the role being a woman who's playing a man who's playing a woman, by the end of the movie they have kind of merged into one. By the end of the movie there are a lot of elements of Victor in Victoria. And because she's playing a female impersonator, she gets to push the limits a bit for especially her singing ability in ways she might not be able to or need to in other roles. Plus she just has so many quips and sassy moments in this movie. It is honestly, in my opinion, one of the funnier movies Julie made, along with Star. But Victor Victoria's got an anniversary this year, so there will be a Today in Julie Andrews history video about it coming up soon. So we'll talk a lot more about it then. Also, Oscar nomination. Number 3, Maria in The Sound of Music. What? Sound of Music's not number 1? How is that possible? Well, honestly, it's a bit easier for me to explain just by explaining what number 2 and number 1 are, but we'll get to those in a minute. But Maria's role is still everything. She's just human. That's probably the best way to describe her. Heck, you could even pull the "I'm not like other girls" card on her. But she is not a Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Whole video up there if you don't know what a Manic Pixie Dream Girl is or how she's been incorrectly classified as one in the past. In a lot of ways Maria is very, very confident about herself, but she's not in just as many ways. She's very bold, almost to the point where you can say it's impetuous, but at the same time she's terrified and we see her being very vulnerable a lot of the time. There's definitely an element of embracing her inner child with her, but she never feels childish. And for all her tomboy, not like the other girls, she is still very feminine a lot of the time. I think that's really the biggest thing with her. She's just human. Or maybe it's 9 years of writing fanfiction and diving really deep into her characters to the point where how much of it is my imagination and how much of it is actually in the original source material, let alone the original history. I don't know. Anyway, also, like Victor Victoria, Oscar nomination. But it's not higher than number 3 because number 2, Mary Poppins in Mary Poppins. Well, first of all, she won the Oscar for this. Second of all, This was the reason she was hesitant about doing Sound of Music, because she was worried it would leave her typecast as nannies and governesses, and oh boy did that happen. But basically Mary Poppins is all the governess type elements of Maria turned up to 11. Mary Poppins as a character is not unlikable, and I don't want to say she's less human than Maria, even though that's almost like the best word I can use to describe it. And by less human I mean almost like robotic. I don't know, it's hard to explain. In terms of her childcare abilities, compared to Maria, she's a lot firmer and unyielding. Mary Poppins is restricted as a character in a way that Maria is not. I feel like her character is one that would probably be a little harder to play, and therefore more impressive to pull off. So we've gone through her 3 Oscar-nominated performances, and we still haven't hit number 1. Number 1, Stephanie Anderson in Duet for One. Honestly, I hate this character for a lot of the movie. So if Julie Andrews, my favourite person in the universe, can play a role where I hate the character, then wow. So out of all the movies on this list, this is probably the least well known, which I think is because it's a British film, not an American one. So Victor Victoria and Sound of Music and Mary Poppins are all musicals, whereas Hawaii is much more a drama, and Duet for One is the same. But if you haven't heard of it, Julie plays a very, very famous violinist named Stephanie Anderson who has multiple sclerosis. So I really do feel bad for the character, and I will not pretend to understand what having MS is like. But in addition to the MS, meaning she can't play the violin as well as she used to, her husband starts having an affair and her star pupil leaves to go overseas, and really her life is just falling apart. This performance is so dramatic and raw in a way that no other performance she's ever done is. The scenes where she's trying to play the violin and her hands shake so much, or when she's trying to walk and she can't, are so emotional. And at the same time, as I said, she's really, really annoying. As I said, her husband's having an affair, kind of. Basically, she walks in, or rather wheels in, because she's in a wheelchair during this scene, to see her husband holding the secretary's hand. That's it. And despite that, in the end, she and her husband are on good terms by the end. And while she sees her star pupil leaving her as a huge betrayal, and you can understand that with everything else going on in her life, it makes sense, it's really not. She gets furious with him when he does something that's perfectly acceptable for him to do, because she sees it as a betrayal. Which is completely understandable, but also a little unfair on Constantine's part. With this movie, she gets to show a whole new side of her acting ability that we never see anywhere else. And those are my top 5 favourite movie performances by Julie Andrews. It's actually really kind of interesting how a lot of these roles are from movies I don't particularly care for. Sound of Music is my all-time favourite movie in the world, you all know that. And Victor Victoria would probably be in my top 3 of Julie's movies. But Mary Poppins is closer to the middle, and Duet for One and particularly Hawaii are right at the bottom. And yet they're 2 of the best performances she's ever given. It's interesting how my absolute love for the way she plays these roles doesn't transfer more onto the movie itself. But anyway, that's it for today. Let me know, what is your favourite role that Julie ever played? And where do you like the movie as a whole in comparison with that? Stay safe guys, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next time. So long, farewell!